Hello friends, welcome again today to my YouTube channel where I share some great ideas. Today I want to show you how I put threads on wood for little jewelry boxes or whatever you want to store in them. You're going to see a way that's I don't think you've ever seen or that has ever been done before, but it works for me and I'm quite pleased with it. Anyway, here's the last box that I made, birch on the bottom, and it's got a lid that you just screw it off, and there's the threads on the box there, and then threads inside the lid there. So that's what we're going to attempt to do today. But before we start, this is kind of the first one I made. I made it different, and then I looked at what other people done. I put the threads on the outside on the lid part, and then the threads on the inside of the box there. Now, I think this is what's important if you're going to do something like this, and there's other ways to do it that I'm going to show you today. And the next video I'm going to make up a setup that anybody could make threads with. But when I made this one, it seemed like it would fit okay, and then it was a bit stiff. But today it's just super good. And I got to thinking about it. I just took the scrap piece of wood off the floor of my shop, and it's quite cold here in the north. And it's just wood that I'd cut on my own sawmill. It's not kiln dried, so if you live in a warmer climate and you're able to get kiln dried wood, it probably is a good choice. But then I got to thinking, well, why not dry the wood out good before I start it? So, and as you know, when you do bowls, you rough turn the bowls first, and then leave them dry for 6 months, a year sometimes, and then you return them and they turn oval. So I thought, well, that's what's happening with this little box. So I decided to take my blank first and bore out the inside, and then I put it in a real warm place overnight and let it dry out as much as possible. And just by looking at it, it actually looks a little bit oval there, but I'm not sure. So I also did that with a piece of material I'm going to use with the lid. And now I'm going to take and glue this together, glue it tight together. So that I'll do that now, and then later I'll put it in the lathe and true it all up, and I'll prepare for the threads there. So it's basically, this video is just on the thread cutting thing. Another thing I found, in case I forget later on, is the first ones I did, the grain in the box was going this direction, that direction. And the wood, when you were cutting the threads, it wanted to break off because the grains are going that way. And I figured out a way to solve that problem. I actually didn't figure it. I took some information what other people have done. And then when I made this box, after I decided to do it end grain, and it actually held together really well. So the grain in this case goes across this way. So part of it you're cutting straight across end grain, and then part of it the longitudinal grain you're cutting with the grain there, and it held together real well. So that's just a little hint or trick if you want to do something like this, is cut your wood so you have end grain. And of course, when I do the lid like this out of a flat board, it's going to, when I cut the threads on the inside, it's going to be end grain and longitudinal grains. There's no problem. So maybe it's a good idea to do the base like that too, and then they shrink and expand in the same manner. So anyway, I'll get this all glued together, and then we'll do a setup, and you'll be surprised how I cut those threads. It's never been done before, and I don't think anybody in the world has ever done it quite like this. Anyway, stay tuned and you'll see how this goes. Okay, I'm just about ready to start the threading operation here in a kind of an unconventional way, but it just works totally fantastic. And I know a lot of you that do woodwork will not be able to do it like this, but I'm going to make a jig that you can use a router and your wood lathe, of course, for. But anyway, yeah, I'm using a metal lathe. The metal lathe has a capability of cutting just about any thread per inch or millimeter thread as well, and could cut right-hand threads or left-hand threads. I've got this set up to cut 16 threads per inch, which is quite common for commercial bought that you can buy jigs to do on your wood lathe or whatever. But anyway, a couple things I learned from watching different people's YouTube video, and that is, which I mentioned before about cutting it so it's end-grained wood and longitudinal when you're cutting with the grain, is to harden up your wood or secure or whatever. Get it so it's held together better. So I used epoxy, not epoxy, pardon me, CA glue. I just put CA glue around there, and before I started there, and maybe that'll help a little bit. Mainly it's when you get down farther in your last cuts and that the CA glue is good. So, and so that's what I did on this one, and you can see the threads there. They're kind of dark colored, and they're just about like solid plastic, whatever. Anyway, I've of course widened this out, lathed it off, widened it out, and used a Forster bit to drill it in and then widen it near the surface there. So anyway, I'm going to reposition this, and then I'll show you the setup that I use for cutting those threads, and then we'll reposition a couple times, see if you can get a shot of it and what I'm doing here. Okay, here's the setup that I'm using for actually cutting the thread. What I've got in here is, see it fairly close there, 60-degree double bevel cutter. And it's mounted in this unit here. It's kind of like a oversized Dremel thing. And then I made this, took a piece of steel, and that's screwed on, and that's screwed onto a base that came with this unit here. It's a little adjustable base so you can route to a certain thickness there. And then to secure it to the lathe, I put a piece of 1/2 by 1/2. It was actually a worn out carbide tool bit, welded that on. And then it's fairly easy. It's just a matter of popping it in there like that. And that fits in there. And I tighten these down. And it's all secure. And then the next thing I do is I just adjust this so it's straight distance along the lathe there. So it's, and I can pretty well do that by eye. I can't think of any other way to do it. And then lock it in, and I'm just about ready to go. Then I'm going to move it into position. And I'm going to cut on the outside, that way I can see the cutter, and bring it up to where it's just touching the wood. I think I got it there. And which you can't really see here, but I have a cross-slide dial here that's calibrated in thousandths of an inch, and I'm going to move that to the 0 position. Okay, the 0 position. Then when I make a cut, I'll advance my cut, what I want, say 10 thousandths of an inch right at the beginning. And then I'll make the cut, and then which it's in here, and then I just back it out and bring it back out and bring it back to my 0 point, or say the 10 thousandths cut, and then adjust for another cut the next time. But usually what I do is, so I don't get mixed up, is I adjust this back to 0 for each cut. And then I'm ready to cut there. So I'll get this started here, and you'll see how it works. Down here on the side of the lathe, there's a synchronizing dial, so you can make multiple cuts on the same thread. And it's got numbers on it, 1, 3, 5, and 7. And since I'm cutting a even number of threads, I can stop it or index it on any number. And there's a lever right here. Guess you didn't see that. We'll just go back here. To engage it onto this screw right here. That's called your lead. And so that will turn. That dial will turn, and when it gets to the 1 here, then I engage it and lock it in. And I can go in and out and in and out, but as long as I lock it onto one of these numbers here, it'll synchronize there. So anyway, that's how it goes. Because the slowest speed on the lathe is too fast, you want it to go really slow, I found that the best way is just to turn this by hand, and I can get a nice slow even cut. So I've got everything locked up here. I've got it into the lever down, and I'll just bring this up closer here, and then we'll be ready to cut our thread. Okay, so I'm going to turn it on here, and I'm going to shut it off, unlock it with the lever, bring my back, and then I'll bring it back to the 0 point. Got that on the 0, and now I'll just move this till I get it in position and lock it down, and I usually have to come back a bit, and then I'm ready to start my next cut there. Okay, I've got the thread dial in the right position, and going to lock it into, check to make sure it's locked in. And I've adjusted it 5/1000ths on the gauge here for this cut. So it's just a matter of turning it on. So I don't get mixed up, I turn it off here, then I back it off here, one turn, I disengage it from that lead screw there, and then back it off, and check the thread. And it's coming up really well there. You don't want to bring it exactly right up to a point, and then those little tips get weak. Okay, I've pretty well got it to a point, but needs a little bit more. So now I'm going to follow some of the advice that I learned and put the CA glue on it. And then I'm just going to Okay, after the CA dried, I went through and made several more shallow cuts just to clean the CA out of the grooves there, so I'm all done. Now the next step is I'm going to take that off and cut the top off, and then get the bottom ready for the outside thread that'll match that. So I'll go ahead and get that, and then you'll be able to see a little better on the outside as I cut those threads. Okay, here's the lid for our for the little box I'm making. I got the threads done on the inside, and I've got the box part laid down to the right size to start the threads on there. But no matter if you make it with a regular jig that's made for this, or you make a special jig for cutting threads, most of the jigs are cut at 16 threads per inch. Depending on which one you cut first, I cut the lid first, so that's the inside measurement. The outside measurement that you're going to put threads on has to be larger. And if you go to a thread chart for 3/4 16 threads per inch, the difference is 1/16 of an inch. And if you were doing metric, you could find that information out there too. So what I'm using is caliper, vernier caliper, and I've measured the inside of the box of the lid first, and then added about 60/1000ths on the scale here and made that big, and it'll come out reasonable. you don't want to be shy on material, and you don't want to be too big either. It's good to have it right on, but I tend to have it just a hair bigger, and I can always sand it down a little bit and make the grooves a little deeper. So anyway, I'll get this set up here, and you'll be able to see it cut the thread here. We'll just do 1 or 2 passes, and then I'll finish it up, the project up, and then show you when it's done. Okay, I've got everything locked up here. I believe it's ready to go. We just turn the cutter on. I forgot to engage the gear to the lead screw there, so she's ready to go now. At the end here, you have to have a little groove no matter which way you do it. You can for the cutter to come out. Now, I just withdraw this 1 turn, take it out of gear, bring it back, check my dial, it's right there. Advance a cut. Here. Set that back to 0. Okay, it's looking good. You can start checking it any time just to see if it'll go on. Little bit big. Won't quite start. So I'm going to sand this down and cut it deeper. When the lid starts to just turn on, then you know you're getting close. So just another few thousandths of an inch, couple cuts, and it'll turn right on there. So I'll go ahead and do that. Well, a few more cuts. It's nice with this scale here. You can just go by the few thousandths at a time. I think I made about 5 or 6 thousandths each cut there. But that screws on nicely there. It's actually screwing off right now. But I put that CA glue on once, probably about 4 cuts before I was finished there, and it looks good, so I'm not going to put any more on. So that's it. That's how it's done on the lathe here. I've cut threads on metal, and it's certainly a lot easier cutting it like this because you can turn it by hand, and when you have it under power, you got to do the whole thing, bang, and then it's done. But cut after cut. But this is a joy to use. It looked a little awkward there, but actually, if I wasn't with the camera there, it goes quite quickly and it's fun to do. So I'll go ahead and finish this up here, a little work on the inside, and then I'll do the outside and it'll be all done. Well, there we go. We got a finished box. I just went ahead and turned it, laid it down so it was even all the way around, and sanded it. It's still got quite a bit of finish work yet to do, but the bottom is laid with the inside out, and being that when you're done you have this screwed on tight, you sand around here, you get a nice super flush surface there. But the threads are working just fine. You might have, when I was watching me do that, it looked kind of complicated and so on and so forth, but super easy to do. It's really fun, actually, and it certainly does a good job. I've certainly enjoyed it anyway. When you make something like this, the price of it would have to be fairly high, because you do a lot of extra works compared to the box where the lid just slips in there. But good for gifts or something. People will treasure those. They're almost what you'd call priceless. But anyway, that was my idea on here, and I'm going to make another jig here when I get time this winter, so you could build one yourself and be able to do threaded boxes and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun, just something different, and works really well. Anyway, I'll see you next time. So long for now.